At exactly 10:17 on a bright Tuesday morning, the most powerful man in the building stopped walking. He had been rushing through the glass hallway of his company's headquarters when he noticed something that almost everyone else had chosen not to see. A young cleaner stood near the executive conference room, quietly wiping a table while trying to keep her face turned away from the sunlight streaming through the windows. But for one brief second, she looked up. That was when CEO Everett Callaway saw the bruises on her cheek. He stopped cold. The cleaner immediately lowered her eyes and pulled the edge of her uniform collar slightly higher, as if she could disappear inside it. She whispered that she was fine and quickly reached for her cleaning cart. But Everett knew the difference between someone being fine and someone desperately hoping nobody would ask questions. And what he did next would leave the entire company speechless. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that one small act can change someone's life, please like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, leave a comment, and subscribe to Kindness Corner 2.0. The woman's name was Maribel Voss, and she was 29 years old. She had worked as a cleaner at Callaway Industries for almost 8 months. Most employees barely noticed her. She arrived before many of them, worked quietly throughout the day, and usually left after the busiest offices had emptied. Maribel never complained. She never asked for special treatment. And whenever someone thanked her for keeping the office clean, she smiled politely and said that she was only doing her job. But behind that quiet smile was a life that had become increasingly difficult. Maribel was raising her 8-year-old daughter, Ilara, alone. Every morning, she prepared breakfast, packed Ilara's school bag, and walked her to the neighborhood bus stop before catching 2 buses to reach the office. Money was always tight, but Maribel had learned to stretch every dollar. She could live without new clothes. She could postpone replacing her old shoes. She could eat simple meals for weeks. But she refused to let Ilara feel that they were helpless. She wanted her daughter to grow up believing that difficult circumstances did not determine a person's worth. On that Tuesday morning, however, Maribel had arrived at work with something different in her eyes. Fear. Everett had noticed it before he noticed the bruises. He watched as she pushed her cart toward the service elevator. Then he quietly followed. When the elevator doors opened, Maribel stepped inside and pressed the button. Everett entered just before the doors closed. She looked startled. Everett didn't ask about her injuries immediately. Instead, he simply stood beside her as the elevator descended. The silence seemed unusually long. When the doors opened, Maribel hurried toward the employee corridor, but Everett gently asked her to wait. She froze. He told her that he had noticed her face and wanted to make sure she was safe. Maribel immediately said she had fallen. It was the same explanation she had apparently given several people before. But Everett didn't accuse her of lying. He simply told her that she didn't have to explain anything she wasn't ready to explain. That unexpected kindness made Maribel's eyes fill with tears. She looked toward the floor and admitted that things at home had become difficult. She carefully explained that someone she knew had been treating her badly and that she had been afraid to speak because she needed her job and didn't want trouble following her into the workplace. Everett listened without interrupting. Then he did something nobody expected. Instead of telling security to investigate or demanding answers, he asked Maribel what she needed right now. She stared at him as though nobody had ever asked her that question. Not what happened. Not why she stayed. Not why she didn't leave sooner. What did she need? Maribel quietly answered that she needed a safe place for herself and her daughter. Everett nodded. He immediately contacted the appropriate workplace support team and arranged for Maribel to take paid leave while she handled the situation. He made sure the company would not punish her for needing time away. But that wasn't the end. Everett also learned that Maribel had been trying to keep her daughter enrolled in a nearby school despite rising expenses. He arranged for the company's employee assistance program to help with temporary housing information, transportation, and school-related support. He made one thing very clear to everyone involved. Maribel was not a problem to be managed. She was a person who deserved dignity. News of Everett's actions spread through the building by lunchtime. Some employees were shocked because their CEO was known for being demanding and extremely focused on business. He had built Callaway Industries from a small technology company into a major corporation. He was respected. He was feared. But very few people had ever seen him show this kind of personal concern for an employee. Then something unexpected happened. A senior manager named Graham Weller approached Everett privately and suggested that the company should avoid becoming involved in personal matters. Everett looked at him calmly and reminded him that a company was not just a collection of numbers on a spreadsheet. It was made of people. People who had families. People who had struggles. People who sometimes needed help. The room became quiet. Everett then announced that Callaway Industries would review its employee support policies and create a confidential assistance program for workers facing serious personal difficulties. The announcement stunned everyone. For years, many employees had assumed that corporate leadership cared only about profits. Now they were seeing something different. But Everett wasn't finished. That afternoon, he visited the employee break room and found several cleaners eating lunch together. Maribel wasn't there. Her co-workers were nervous when he entered. They expected another corporate speech. Instead, Everett thanked them. He told them that the work they did every day mattered. He said that clean hallways, organized offices, and small acts of care often went unnoticed, but that didn't make them unimportant. One older cleaner, Nadine Mercer, began crying quietly. She explained that many workers were afraid to speak when they were struggling because they believed nobody important would care. Everett told her that this needed to change. And he meant it. Over the next few weeks, the company began putting those promises into action. A confidential support line was established. Employees were given clearer access to counseling and emergency assistance resources. Managers were trained to recognize when workers might need support rather than punishment. And most importantly, people began talking to one another again. Maribel eventually returned to work. The bruises had faded, but something else had changed. She no longer walked through the building with her shoulders lowered. She looked people in the eyes. She smiled more often. One afternoon, Everett saw her cleaning the large lobby windows. Outside, the city was bright beneath a clear blue sky. Maribel noticed him and smiled. She told him that Alara was doing well in school and had recently drawn a picture of the company building. Everett smiled and asked what the picture looked like. Maribel laughed softly and said that Alara had drawn a giant building with a tiny person standing in front of it. Everett asked who the tiny person was. Maribel answered that it was supposed to be her. Then she added that Alara had written one sentence beneath the picture, "Mom is stronger than she thinks." Everett looked away for a moment. The words affected him more than he expected. Because he had spent most of his life measuring success by numbers. Revenue. Growth. Contracts. Buildings. Investments. But standing there in the lobby, he realized something he had never considered deeply enough. Sometimes success was simply helping one person feel safe enough to believe in tomorrow. Months passed. Maribel continued working, but she also began taking evening classes in office administration. She had always wanted a better career but had never believed she could afford the opportunity. The company helped her access a training program. Eventually, she applied for an administrative assistant position. When the results were announced, she got the job. On her first day in the new role, she walked past the cleaning department and stopped to thank the coworkers who had supported her. She hadn't forgotten where she started. She never wanted to. Later that afternoon, Everett walked through the same hallway where he had first noticed her bruises. He saw Maribel sitting at a desk, organizing documents. For a moment, neither said anything. Then Maribel smiled. Everett smiled back. There was no dramatic celebration. No applause. No cameras. Just two people who understood how much could change when someone decided to notice. And perhaps that was the real lesson. Maribel had not needed someone to rescue her forever. She needed someone to believe that her life was worth protecting while she found her own strength. Everett had not solved every problem in the world. He had simply refused to look away. And sometimes, refusing to look away is where kindness begins. If this story touched your heart, please support this video by liking it, sharing it with someone who believes in compassion, and subscribing to Kindness Corner 2.0. Your support helps these emotional stories reach people who may need a little hope. And before we reach the ending, leave a comment saying, kindness begins when we notice, if you believe everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, no matter their position in life. 1 year later, Elara visited Callaway Industries with her mother. She walked through the lobby carrying the same picture she had drawn months earlier. This time, the picture was different. It showed a huge building, Maribel standing confidently in front of it, and dozens of tiny people around her. At the top, Elara had written a new sentence. People can become stronger when someone believes in them. Maribel handed the picture to Everett. He looked at it for several seconds before carefully placing it inside his office. Not on a hidden shelf. Not inside a drawer. Right beside the framed certificate recognizing his company as one of the fastest-growing businesses in the region. Because to Everett Callaway, that little drawing had become more valuable than any award. It reminded him of the morning when he could have walked past. He could have pretended not to notice. He could have decided that Maribel's problems were none of his business. But he stopped. He noticed. He listened. And one small decision changed more than one life. Maribel eventually became a supervisor, helping other employees who were struggling to find their way forward. And whenever a new cleaner joined the company, she made sure to greet them personally. She never forgot what it felt like to be invisible. So she made a promise to herself. No one who crossed her path would feel invisible if she could help it. Because sometimes the person cleaning your office may be carrying a story you know nothing about. Sometimes the quietest person in the room may be fighting the hardest battle. And sometimes, all it takes to begin changing someone's life is one person brave enough to stop, look closer, and simply ask, "Are you okay?" That Tuesday morning, Everett saw Bruises. But what he truly saw was a person who needed to know that her life mattered. And his reaction didn't just shock everyone in the company. It reminded them of something far more powerful than money, titles, or success. Kindness doesn't ask how important you are. It asks,